The following is a free-for-download audiobook available on Google Drive. From Thom Hartmann Report, Substack Daily Take. Trump is normalizing the unthinkable. Federal troops in American streets, breaking the law and getting away with it. If you think this ends with LA, you haven't been paying attention. This is Portland 2.0. But scaled up and aimed at the soul of American democracy. Published June 9th, 2025. The following is a song inspired by this article.
Midnight streets, sirens wail, peaceful marchers, faces pale, unmarked vans, no warning sign, rights erased in real time. No badge, no name, just camouflage, justice lost in the mirage. Trump is normalizing the unthinkable, turning freedom into something sinkable. Democracy's edge, now a slippery slope, grasping for truth, losing hope. National Guard on city streets, marching boots, oppressive beats. Governor's pleas fall on deaf ears, amplifying the nation's fears. Local voices drowned in the fray, autocracy paves its way. Trump is normalizing the unthinkable, making the unlawful seem thinkable. Liberty's light flickers and fades as the rule of law degrades. From Portland nights to LA days, constitutional rights set ablaze. First Amendment under attack, Fourth Amendment stabbed in the back. Pardons granted to the insurrection's face, justice systems fall from grace, rhetoric laced with violent cues, empowering extremist views. Checks and balances on the brink, democracy begins to sink. Trump is normalizing the unthinkable, making the intolerable drinkable. Rights once held, now in dispute. Voices silenced, rendered mute. Stand up, speak out, make it loud. Reclaim the rights once endowed. Before the unthinkable becomes the norm, rise together, weather the storm.
Trump. Well, we're going to have troops everywhere. Reporter. What's the bar for sending in the Marines? Trump. The bar is what I think it is. The 2026 and 2028 elections may have just gotten a lot more distant. First, the backstory. It was around 2 a.m. on July 15, 2020, when Mark Pettibone, then 29, was walking home from a relatively calm Black Lives Matter protest in Portland, downtown. He hadn't done anything more productive than wearing a black shirt. No slogans, no mask, no glimmers of violence. Yet, moments later, an unmarked minivan pulled up alongside him. Out jumped several armed men in camouflage with no insignia, slipped a bag over his head, and kidnapped him. Quote, I was terrified, end quote, Pettibone told reporters, his voice trembling with the memory. Quote, it was like being preyed upon, end quote. He was shoved into the van, blindfolded, driven to the federal courthouse, interrogated, and held, with no Miranda rights, no paperwork, no explanation, for nearly 90 minutes before being released without charge or citation. No uniforms, no accountability, no transparency. Yet, a citizen was stripped of his rights and dignity in a blurry, high-stakes operation. And around the same time, in Washington, D.C., Trump was trying to talk General Mark Milley into having the National Guard shoot at protesters in that city. This was not some fringe vigilante action. It was federal agents wielding brute force to cover up Trump's executive order, agents whose silence spoke louder than any badge. The ACLU of Oregon called it an unconstitutional kidnapping. Legal scholars said probable cause was nowhere to be found. Yet, Merrick Garland decided it wasn't worth investigating or prosecuting. Let's just move on. And so, here we are. As Donald Trump, this week, levels a tax on Los Angeles, sending in federal forces to, quote, restore order, end quote, amid unrest provoked by ICE's illegal tactics. Portland's secret police saga shouldn't just echo, it should ring alarm bells. If you thought that unmarked vans and visible state power were confined to dystopian fiction, Pettibone's story proves they already stalk our cities. Trump and his neo-fascist sidekicks sending in the National Guard to Los Angeles may look on the surface like another, quote, law and order, end quote, stunt from a man whose political brand depends on hate and fear. But beneath the posturing lies something far darker and far more dangerous to American democracy. This isn't even remotely about suppressing unrest. Instead, it's about setting an unconstitutional, anti-democratic precedent that the President of the United States can deploy military force on a whim against his political enemies without state or local consent. It's about turning a democratic republic into an authoritarian stronghold. It's about ending federalism, what political scientists and our founders called our form of government as we know it. This is a test and a dress rehearsal. If he gets away with it, he'll probably use this exact same formula to create a crisis worthy of television, bring in the feds, declare a state of emergency to accomplish what he really wants to do. For example, suspending the 2026 election. Yeah, that. Otherwise, Democrats might take the House and begin investigations of him that could lead to more prosecutions and convictions for his various crimes. And there's no way he's going to peacefully allow that. For nearly 250 years, America has been guided by a simple democratic principle that power flows from the people upward and not the other way around. When Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence, he was unambiguous, quote, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, end quote. We elect our sheriffs, our mayors and city councils, our governors and the legislatures. Those elections are our form of, quote, consent, end quote. They are closest to us, most accountable, and best positioned to determine how and when to protect public safety. With very few exceptions having to do with the Civil War and the defense of civil rights protesters, quote, keeping the order through law enforcement has always been handled at the most local level possible so that the people whose lives and daily activities are directly impacted may have a say and can hold police and the people guiding them accountable. But Trump never cared about accountability. And now, like the autocrats he so admires, Putin, Erdogan, and Orban, he is showing us that he sees local government not as a partner in governance, but as an obstacle to be crushed. Let's be clear, sending the National Guard into Los Angeles, especially one done over the objections of California's governor and LA's mayor, is a direct assault on one of the foundational principles of American democracy, local control. This is the classic blueprint for dictatorship, using federal military power to override the will of elected local leaders, and it reflects the way fascism has begun in nearly every nation that has lost their democracy over the past century. Even more glaring proof that this isn't about, quote, law and order, end quote, is the simple reality that Trump isn't responding to a rebellion or foreign invasion. He's responding instead to protests against ICE arresting people without warrants, a clear violation of the Fourth Amendment itself that says, quote, the rights of people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable seizures and searches shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched, the persons or things to be seized, end quote. Trump is attacking the very same protests that are explicitly protected by our Constitution, reflecting the saying so often attributed to Voltaire, it actually came from his biographer, that it's become an all-American cliche. Quote, I may not agree with what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it, end quote. As the First Amendment makes explicit, quote, Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or the press or the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances, end quote. And that's what makes this move so chilling. When a president treats constitutionally protected protest as insurrection and sends in federal troops over the objections of state and local elected officials, he's not preserving order, he's causing disorder and, in the process, destroying our democracy. We've seen this movie before. As mentioned in 2020, Trump deployed federal agents in unmarked military gear to Portland and D.C. They tear-gassed peaceful demonstrators, beat and shot journalists, and abducted citizens off the streets. Americans shrugged. The media called it, quote, controversial, end quote. Merrick Garland decided other things were more important. But the lesson Trump took from it was simple. It worked. He faced no consequences. The courts barely blinked when Biden came into the office. Merrick Garland looked the other way. And now Trump's doing it again, and this time bigger, bolder, and with clearer political intent. Sending the Guard to L.A. sends a message to every mayor and governor in the country. Quote, if you oppose Trump, he can bring troops to your doorstep, and it sends a message to every American. If you protest, if you dissent, if you organize, you may one day be staring down the barrel of a gun flown in on orders from Washington, D.C. End quote. This is not hypothetical. It's not alarmism. It's a dry run for the eventual suppression of all dissent that seriously threatens the Trump regime, just like in Russia, Hungary, or Turkey. Deploying the National Guard for political purposes chills the First Amendment. Giving them the power to assault and arrest protesters breaks the Fourth Amendment. It tells the American people, stay quiet, or the military might show up. That's not democracy. That's authoritarianism in plain sight. Yes, Title X gives the president the power to federalize the National Guard during times of invasion, insurrection, or to overcome obstacles for enforcing federal law. But Trump is taking it a step farther, giving Guard members the power to make arrests and point their guns at civilians, a clear and outrageous violation of the Posse Comitatus Act, enacted in 1878 in response to the violations of civil rights being perpetrated on civilians by the military during the post-Civil War occupation of the South. That law explicitly forbids the military from turning their guns on civilians. Nonetheless, Congressman Maxine Waters is now so concerned that she's begging the guards not to shoot at protesters. This should deeply shock every American. As California Governor Newsom posted on Exeter, quote, "We didn't have a problem until Trump got involved. This is a serious breach of state sovereignty, inflaming tensions while pulling resources from where they're actually needed," end quote. And let's not pretend this is about safety. The same man who praised the, quote, "very fine people," end quote, who killed Heather Heyer when marching with torches in Charlottesville, who pardoned violent insurrectionists and murderers on January 6th, who routinely echoes Hitler when he calls his political opponents, quote, "scum, animals, and vermin," does not care about public peace. He cares about control. He wants to exercise domination and revenge against anybody, like California Governor Newsom, who dares stand up to him. And now he's using federal armed forces to flex his power to lord over the rest of us in ways that would make our founders puke or revolt. If Trump is allowed to again normalize the use of federal troops against American cities, particularly progressive cities that vote against him, it won't stop with Los Angeles. Tomorrow it's Chicago, next month New York, then Seattle, Atlanta, Philadelphia. It becomes a pattern, then a doctrine. The president, as enforcer-in-chief, sending muscle into any jurisdiction it refuses to obey. That's not federalism or anything remotely resembling law and order. That's fascism. And it's not, quote, "coming" or "on its way," end quote. It's here. Now. And if he gets away with it, future presidents will do the same. The same precedent, already weakly established here in Portland, 2020, will be locked in. The checks and balances will have been destroyed. That's assuming there even are elections in the future. As former Trump insider Lev Parnas said, quote, "According to my sources, there are discussions happening right now within Trump's most trusted circle about invoking martial law if the protesters, quote, get out of hand," end quote. They're looking for any excuse, any video, any act of violence, any disruption. That's all they need to justify a crackdown. And it gets worse. What I'm being told is that Trump's allies, including elements connected to the Proud Boys, the Three Percenters, and other far-right militia networks, are planning to infiltrate the June 14th protests, not to support them, to sabotage them. Their goal? Create chaos, spark confrontation, trigger a response from law enforcement, and then hand Trump the justification he needs to clamp down. End quote. America is at a crossroads. We can pretend this is just another Trump stunt, something to be laughed at or dismissed, or we can recognize it for what it is, a direct assault on civilian government, on unconstitutional power grab, and a warning shot at the heart of democracy. It's time to stop normalizing the abnormal. Troops in the streets of American cities should send chills down our spines, not shrugs across the airwaves of the pathetic cheerleading we see on billionaire-owned Fox, quote, News, end quote. When a president uses the military against his own people to score political points, democracy itself becomes collateral damage. And if Trump gets away with this, like he did here in Portland, in 2020, every new act of violence against the Constitution and people who disagree with him, Hegseth is now threatening to deploy Marines, will become less scandalous, more, quote, normal, end quote, and more likely to lead to the next crackdown. And then the state of emergency, and then the suspension of elections. The time to speak out is now. Not after Trump seized a dozen more cities and imprisoned thousands of us. Call your members of Congress, and I'll see you in the streets next Saturday. Pass it along.